Alrighty, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Victoria. I work for CTRL. And just before we get started and I hand it over to our presenters, I just wanted to let you all know that this session is being recorded. We also have closed captions, and if you need to access that, there is an item in your Zoom toolbar that you can click on to enable that. And at the end, we'll also be sharing a link in the chat for a survey, as well as a QR code if you would like to scan with your phone for that link. So with that being said, I'll hand it over to our presenters and let them get started.
Thank you, Victoria, and for everybody in CTRL who helped to put this day of learning for the Ann Farren Conference. My name is Betsy Cohn. I'm a professor in the School of International Service, and I am convened this panel on, it's called Seeking Ways for Generative AI to be a Tool for Learning, Perspectives of Students and a Faculty Skeptic. I'd be that faculty skeptic. We also have two students that I've asked to speak today. And one is Josh Elliott, who is I'm going to put bios in the chat box not bot, chat box when they're speaking. And Josh is a student who doesn't use AI, who sees it as interfering with his learning. I've also asked Caroline Shin to speak. I don't know Caroline as well. I met her through Josh. And Caroline is someone who uses AI in very creative ways to help her with her learning. So those two students are going to give us a good grounding for which we can also engage through the chat box. I've also asked Nathan Favaro to speak about an exercise that he did with his students, which is using AI. And I thought it was a fascinating exercise that he did. And it was written out in the CTRL Beat, which came out just last week. And so we only have 50 minutes, which isn't much time. And I know some of you are just entering right now, so you've missed some of the introduction, but we're eager to get going. So the main thing I want to say here is this is just a new era for us. And I was at a workshop yesterday with about 1,500 faculty from around the country that the American Association of Colleges and Universities did on this topic. And it was the best workshop actually I've been to, and on AI. And it was very, very clear. The message over and over again is that we are just in this new learning environment, and it's going to take us time to work through it and figure it out. And let's embrace it and encourage ourselves to explore the possibilities, knowing that we're not going to get it right and perhaps the first time, or even, and that it's a process. So having said that, I'm going to start us right, and then I will add some things at the end, time permitting. I will say this, which is I'm on day 8 of COVID and very low energy, but at least I have a voice. I couldn't speak the other day. So I'm really happy to be here with you. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Josh Elliott, and I'm going to put his bio in the chat box. So take it away, Josh.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Cohn. It's a pleasure to be here, everyone. And, before I start, I do want to say, I am skeptical of the use of AI in education, as Dr. Cohn said, but it doesn't, refer to all AI overall. I think that there are, impressive uses for AI in the workforce and a lot of other places. So, my skepticism of AI is not complete, but as Dr. Cohn said, in regards to AI in education, I believe it interferes with my learning. So there are a lot of reasons for this. I mean, the first one is perhaps the most obvious, but it's that AI is wrong a lot. Its hallucinations are not only really common, but often really impressive. Especially as a non-expert engaging in coursework and learning, there is, as far as I can tell, a real danger in asking AI for things I don't understand, whether it's, a blog post or discussion board post on a subject that I don't get. Not only can I submit work that's incorrect then, but I can also internalize those, often impressive misunderstandings of theory or any other body of work. Another really important thing is to me, AI takes the struggle out of work. And I know that that's a little bit odd to say, but I think, research has proven, and this is very true for me, that struggle is where I learn. And I don't particularly want to outsource it to something else that'll do that struggle for me. I mean, it's obviously never fun, but an example is writing. For me, writing is how I discover what I think. If you were to look at my notes, which may become invisible, but there's a lot of writing that I've done in advance of this. And the danger I see in letting ChatGPT or really any other AI system or large language model do the writing for me is not only do I not, take stock of where I am and organize my work, but I also don't know what I don't know. As I write, I engage with subjects and realize what I don't understand. That content that we did 3 weeks ago, as I, make the outline of my essay, I realized I didn't get that. And I need to go to office hours to talk to a peer. And by not doing that, giving it to I think I lose a chance to struggle. And kind of from that, not struggling then hurts the development of really core skills. I'll cover them in a second, but an example is a student that uses an AI system. Maybe they were in high school and they used AI a lot. And so a freshman coming into AU or any other university who struggles with, complex scholarly sources, as everyone does at the start. And I've spoken to people who do this, rely on AI to summarize for them, to give them the cliff note. And the danger here, and in a lot of other circumstances, is that, as far as I know, and as far as others have said, it can create a dependence. By originally, or really at any stage, relying on artificial intelligence to do this work for you, you lose opportunities to grow core skills, for organization, how to read and engage with a complex text that you've never encountered before. You don't grow those organization skills. For analysis, how to understand the work, how to connect different sections of the text and how to connect that text to other texts, or even time management. You have a problem you don't know how to do. How do you split up the time? How much time do you need to spend on the introduction and conclusion versus the methodology? I mean, other skills, creativity, creative problem solving and critical thinking are all really valuable. And by letting an AI system do that work for us, we lose opportunities to grow those really important core and critical soft skills. I mean, it's also important to mention, this is more personal than perhaps the other ones, but to me, using AI feels wrong. It feels like cheating. Not only, of course, because in many circumstances with inadequate citation, it is academic integrity code violation, but also just because it really is, as far as I can tell, a waste of my time, my energy, my tuition. That's not to say that, someone else using AI I would take issue with. I think, to me, it is personal. It's a personal choice. Of course, it is a, systemic and institutional problem, but I find that it's, a waste of, as I said, my tuition. And even if I got a worse grade than someone else, using AI to improve my grade would feel like a waste. Not only would any feedback I get not particularly be useful, but also I wouldn't learn or grow from the process of doing it. As I said, the struggle is really where I found value. With that said, of course, a lot of people view it differently, and that's perfectly reasonable to me. Some people see it no different than, a calculator on a math test. I use a calculator on every math test I take. But as far as I can tell, you in doing systems of math still improve. By completely relying on AI, or even mostly relying on AI, you cannot do that. Moving on to, AI for faculty, its applicability, and my advice, because this is really an important part of why we're here as well. It's, primarily, and I think this is pretty much universally understood at this point, AI can't be ignored. This is a subject that's really important. Dr. Cohn mentioned, the engagement across education with this new and complex problem. But I think my addition is, I really think it's important to keep in mind that as far as I can tell, there will not be what I'm going to, call a silver bullet, whatever you want to call it. There is no surefire way to tell both if something was created by AI, a student submission, or in the same way, if an assignment is AI proof, if you can create an assignment that, can't be used with AI. And we all saw Turnitin's AI tool get deactivated last semester. I mean, across the market, there are a lot of other tools that have really questionable efficacy. And I think again, there's a danger, especially when it comes to academic integrity, because this is such a big topic, and using tools that are as flawed as the ones we found are, with at this point practically deregulated AI market in really intense competition, both between different AI companies, but also internally between the systems that make the products and then the systems that are attempting to oversee them and tell you whether or not something was AI generated. I think there's a real danger in expecting that these tools will, come about and solve this problem for us. moving past that, so what? What do we do now? It's a great question. I mean, the first thing, and I think this one is again a little bit obvious, is to talk about it with students. Not only do I learn a lot from hearing professors like Dr. Cohn speak about AI in our classes, but also I learn, kind of the same equally from hearing my peers talk about it. I'm sure I'll learn a lot when Caroline speaks. And, it's really, really important, not only I assume to have us hear what you have to say, but also to have everyone create an environment where it's an open discussion. Silence gives the opportunity for people to use AI if that's not what you intend. And especially if you do intend it, clarity on the implementation of AI in a class is super, super important. I think something that is maybe a little bit, less common of a point is for me, a lot of professors I know, especially in high schools and even middle schools, have tried to replace, take home work with in-person lockdown browser timed exams or even oral exams. And I think, I understand the idea there, but the issue I take is, as we're in education, learning to enter, learning the skills and requirements of the workforce, there really are few and far between circumstances where you will be seated at a computer with no access to the internet, not only no chat GTP or whatever else, but no Google and no notes of your own. I think those circumstances are, really not predictable. It is a lot less valuable to have that type of evaluation than it would be to talk about it. And I think from that, there is a real question. Okay, so what if we still should be doing these exams that are, remote and take home? You have the opportunity. I think the truth is, students now no longer particularly have to do the work they're assigned. And this is a whole new world, right? I, as a student, can choose whether or not I want to write this essay. You can, of course, choose whether or not you think I made it with AI. But the truth is then that explaining why these assignments are valuable is important. That doesn't mean you have to give, a long speech on why this is important to education, but just saying why it is specifically, this work has been assigned will help people understand why, it's not busy work, but it actually will help in their education. I mean, obviously, making sure that assignments are reasonable and doable, especially within workable timeframes, is also super important. I think to me and to all students, AI is an option, and it is objectively a really attractive one. But when it comes down to it, AI doesn't help me learn. And I know that there is a lot of, discussion of it's the death of high school English and a whole revolution of how we educate and learn. And that's true. But I think the truth is lots of students and of course, probably lots of faculty feel the same way. It doesn't help us learn. Thank you.
Wow, Josh, thank you. I had spoken with Josh and Caroline, gave them a bunch of questions, which included advice for faculty and whatever. And now you know why it's such an honor for me to be a professor for Josh. He's such a thoughtful guy. And so I now would like to ask Caroline to speak so that we can keep the conversation going and then open it up a little bit. Caroline Jin, I don't know you as well, but we've talked last week when I had a voice still. And I was in awe of the ways in which you use ChatGPT, Google Bard as a study buddy, essentially, and used it in ways that I had never thought of. So I'm really pleased that you, from California, where it's very early, you've agreed to be on this panel. So take it away, Caroline. I'm going to put your bio in the chat box.
Of course. So firstly, I just want to preface by saying that AI has always been a technology that has existed coming from the Bay Area. It's something that we've had conversations about, but the difference that we're seeing right now is that AI is now accessible. It's free. And so I think the difference that we're seeing is students who previously could afford higher paying AI systems have probably likely been utilizing it, especially students who are a little more tech savvy. And now students who cannot financially afford it or just were not aware of AI are now starting to tap into this resource. So at the center of AI, I believe that it is about accessibility. It's a free resource that circumvents a lot of the issues around like peer tutoring access, as well as just paid tutoring access issues. So when we talk about AI, I want to break down accessibility into a few core issues issues. Firstly, I'm also speaking both as a student, but also as somebody who has TA'd classes before. I'm also TAing a class next semester. And one of the biggest issues I've found within AU is the lack of resources around international students, specifically with different languages. And I understand that it's very hard for us to curate a perfect writing center that has every single language there, and we can produce like translation services and just have students who know every single language there. That simply isn't the truth. And as somebody who speaks a dialect that Google Translate quite literally doesn't have, it previously was very, very hard to utilize a lot of these online services. AI does the brilliant job of jumping past that and actually being able to translate and being able to bring students who traditionally were not in that conversation into that. I also think this applies to students with very different backgrounds. I think we can, as like professors, you likely can kind of tell already, somebody who has an education from like a private school that is overfunded versus a school that is not funded at all, you're going to see difference in backgrounds. And I think AI can bridge a lot of that gaps. And just in general, from a scheduling standpoint, if a student is working multiple jobs as myself and just trying to figure out a lot of different aspects, office hours don't work for me because I'm working throughout most of the day, and it's very hard for me to squeeze out time, meaning that every single minute that I can utilize with space time that I can maximize, utilizing AI, which I'll touch on later, I think is very, very crucial here. And it's really actually getting the most value out of my dollar when I have tuition going into this school because I can actually utilize that face time more. So touching into this idea of utilizing AI as a study buddy, this is the primary way that I utilize AI, and I think that I've utilized it through a lot of my classes in a lot of different settings, which speaks to how universal it is. And I think specifically from a humanities standpoint, I think that it's been very, very effective. I do want to preface by saying that AI is not very well versed when it comes to STEM topics, specifically math, science, even with like CS stuff. A lot of it still hasn't been figured out. And so as a professor, I do think it's important to preface by saying on these specific topics, AI is probably going to be pretty useless to you, or it's just going to mislead you in many ways. And I think it's worth it for you to come more to me. But when it comes to humanities and specifically breaking that down, things I have already produced, it's been very effective for me. So the number one way that I've found AI to be very, very useful is that I take notes that I have written in class already, and I put it through AI and have it basically take that information that I'm feeding it, meaning that it's not pulling information from the different websites that may be wrong. This is all information that likely has come from a professor's mouth, and I ask it I ask it to pose me different questions, and I utilize it as a partner. I think of it almost like a group study session, and I've actually found that I've utilized it in group study session as another voice, which can never be wrong. And there are times when students can mislead ourselves. Like we've gone to group study sessions and we've gone down the rabbit hole and said the wrong thing. And I think that AI can very much also do that. And so students, we need to be made aware of the risks of that. And I think it's starting to become more common, like the conversations about how AI citations are not good whatsoever, or a lot of these other things around AI just not being as effective / misleading you can happen. Which then leads me into my other kind of segue, which is with the misleading of topics being brought more to the forefront of classrooms, I think it's important that professors become more accessible. I personally have always utilized AI as a stepping stone for office hours. Sometimes I will read an entire piece of text or go through multiple lectures, and I simply feel like I'm completely behind. I have no clue what to even ask. I don't have any starting points. AI allows me to have those grasping starting points, those initial questions of, okay, maybe this is an initial understanding, but AI can mislead me. So let's think about how I can pose this to professor and actually maximize a lot of that time within office hours, especially because for me, with my super tight schedule, working like 3 jobs, I simply don't have time to have like office hours every single week and like cutting that time out of my schedule. And then from more of like just further into like different ways I utilize it throughout my research and writing, I find that it helps me fine tune a lot of different topics. I find that I'm somebody who just kind of goes everywhere with a lot of different topics within writing. AI has actually in the past been able to tell me, you've gone 5 different directions. Let's bring it down to one. And I think that that's still my writing. I really love my voice within my writing, but it just is a little bit of a guide. And also from a professor standpoint, probably helps because it doesn't mean we're going every single direction. I've also found that throughout my writing, it comes up with little different ideas or beginnings, with like a lot of these different topics, especially from like historical essays or things that talk about pieces of history. It essentially is a glorified Google. It gives me the name of an event or maybe just a small brief of it, but I will always go and study further into it because at the end of the day, AI is never going to tell me enough information that is actually enough for me to write about it. And I think a lot of students are in the same boat, which is we understand that AI can be misleading, but also AI can pull from pieces of history and tell us good precedents for our writing. And so it just creates little pieces of examples. And just in general, I think of it as a better piece of Google. And right now, obviously, Google doesn't have any restrictions. And if anything, Google is actually such a great resource for us. I've also found that with writing, it's an amazing editing tool. I think all of us probably know Grammarly at this point or are probably very familiar with it. I'd like to point out that with Grammarly, there is a big difference between free Grammarly and Grammarly Premium. And with Grammarly Premium, it makes your writing far more succinct. It tells you all the different ways to reframe and looks at it from a bigger picture. Caveat though, Grammarly Premium requires money, which is once again something not every student can say that they can like easily expend onto something like that. And so while it can make a student seem like a better writer, AI can also do the same thing without the financial firewall that exists around Grammarly Premium. And so I think that it's very important for that. And on top of that is often with AI, instead of just Grammarly Premium telling you this is an edit you should make, you can actually interrogate AI of, okay, like why is it that I need to restructure my sentence? I've also found that from a TA standpoint, I've asked for students to utilize AI when I'm not there, or maybe just like they may be very shy about it and like they don't want to be coming to me asking like how can I work on my different grammar structures, and these are all universal laws, right? Like at the end of the day, if a professor is less accessible or a student's just more introverted and scared, AI is a judge-free, guilt-free way to have those conversations. I've also found that it's really good for just practicing and reviewing and also going through a lot of dense information that maybe we don't need to necessarily touch on, but I need to find the core of what we need to find. So this is really applicable within research. If I'm going through like 500-page PDFs, I'm not going to read it all, frankly. And pre-AI, I probably would have either tried to ignore it and try to find Control F and try to find what I'm looking for. But with AI now, I can throw that into AI, have it spit me out. This is the page you need to go to. And I read that section myself because once again, AI is not going to break it down as good as if I'm reading it. And just in general, I try to just have conversations with AI. For example, if I do have a piece of text that I just like simply cannot understand, like the barrier is so high for it, I typically will throw it into AI after I read it and found I can't understand this, especially because I'm dyslexic. I'm just trying to piece together the letters and maybe the dyslexia is just really bad one day. AI will give me the guiding kind of ropes to understand it. Essentially, these ropes are going to say, oh yeah, this may be a focal point that you want to turn to. Now, at the back of my mind, I know that AI can mislead me. I want to preface that. But at the same time, if I'd previously not had AI, either would have just put the reading down because it's simply too big of a struggle, or I would have completely misunderstood the reading even far more, and I wouldn't have reread it as many times. So I think that AI actually can be that guiding. And finally, in terms of just like a final touching point, as somebody who has started to interview through the industry and trying to figure out like future career goals, I have found that AI is a touch point that different career points are looking for. They are asking like, can you utilize it? Many Hill offices actually have the paid subscription of it, meaning that it is an important skill to have from an employability standpoint. So in terms of in the future, like what I'm asking for professors as to make AI even more accessible, I think that first thing, having office hours to kind of accompany that, saying it's okay if you use AI as a study buddy, but come to me at office hours and I'm more than happy to fact check. And during office hours, you can be honest saying, AI told me this. Is this true? Can you walk me through this process so that students can be honest? And secondly, creating proper citation systems for AI to be utilized in research, and even creating methods to say, okay, what is it that you got from AI? Asking students to put down comments. And just in general, having honest conversation about AI is super important because I think it's the next path to accessibility. Thank you.
Okay, so we now learn two really different views, which is why I asked them, and they're friends. And as you can see, I will say I don't think they're your average AU student, but I think they're our typical AU students, which they are really engaged in learning. They are superstars, and they are interested in their learning and how they can best go about doing that. And what I find it really interesting, so I'm going to pause to reflect. I'm going to ask you to put into the chat box, not the bot, the box, one point that you think is worth remembering or one question that you have. So one point to remember from what they said or one question. I'll give us a minute. And particularly ask Caroline and Josh to look to see if there are any questions to them that they would like to answer. All right. Carolyn, do you want to start out and answer some of those questions? Do you want me to repeat them? Or I'm sure you got them faster than I could.
All good. So I think the first question that I saw was what specific AIs do I personally use? So I think Chat GPT is probably the largest name. Bard, Google is right now competing. And from like someone who is also kind of deeply invested into the industry, Chat GPT is actually setting the bar almost for where AI should be. And all these big tech companies are trying to catch up, which is very funny because Chat GPT have made their services free for at least the 3 version. So there is that like the best, essentially what is the most accessible is also free, which is great. I think that I personally like there's like ways you could get around paying it. I know most students typically don't. So there is that caveat. I've also found that there are ways that AI has been integrated into other services. So Chat PDF is like a great service where essentially is able to take very long PDFs and kind of go through it. And actually one thing I found is it can ask me questions after I've done readings to see if I actually know the reading. So they kind of produce like research questions afterwards. And then let me, so sorry, I need so one question I've also seen is like different asking for more ways in which students or professors can kind of engage here. So in terms of the citation system, this is a little complicated because I have seen different professors of mine actually require citations for AI. So either creating your own system, or I can imagine that some of the official systems have already created it. And I think I actually spoke to Professor Cohn very in-depthly about this. She's actually done a really awesome job of creating a method where students can actually submit what AI sent or produced for them, and then students can kind of write comments of what they've learned from it, and then send in another draft of ways they've made revisions based off what AI has shown. I think that actually is more work from a student standpoint, but as a student, I would be more than happy to do that because I think I learned the most from that. So that's kind of another way to have those citation systems. And just in general, having those honest conversations is really important. One thing, and just for the university, I think is important to flag is maybe integrating more AI resources into our writing centers and having students that can teach as a peer almost, so it's less intimidating, have those conversations and use the writing center as a better resource on how to utilize AI can also be really helpful.
I'm going to have to cut you off because of time, because we only have 50 minutes. And so Josh, give you a chance to respond to some of the questions or to what you heard from Caroline.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, they're great questions. I mean, the first question I saw that really jumped out to me is, the line between like what one might call like productive struggle and what one would call like unproductive struggle. And so, it's hard to say there. I think very honestly, it comes down to professors. You guys are the experts, not only in education, but in the topic. I mean, so I think for me, it's talking about, I said these assignments not only have to be, interesting and you should try to explain why they're important, but also like making sure that they truly are valuable. Work that feels like busy work, work that seems like busy work is much more likely to be used to be done with AI than anything else. I mean, so there isn't a clear line, unfortunately, and I don't think that there ever will be one. But if you, as an expert, think that it's valuable for us to do that work, then I would agree that it's valuable. Another question that I saw is the line between study buddy and doing the work for you. And again, I don't have a perfect answer here. I think it's a question of degrees. Caroline's uses of AI are really both innovative and seemingly incredibly useful. I mean, accessibility is an incredible point. I mean, it is a really valuable tool in degrees. I think, it comes down to at that point, you again being clear and being open with your students. If you're saying, it's totally fine for you to use this as a study buddy, that's incredible. But very like having specific lines, this is why the discussion is so important. Can it give you a draft? Can it edit your draft? Can it edit your final essay? There aren't answers on these questions, but it's you guys who are going to show us where the lines are.
Thank you. I wish we had more time and I just want to, I'm going to sum up this portion of the workshop by just saying that I surveyed my students last semester at the very beginning, 2 classes, and it's a small, sample. But what I found was that the first year students were using AI much more than the sophomores and juniors. And Josh was in one of those classes of the sophomores and juniors. But what surprised me was that they were using AI more by similar to what Caroline discussed, which is that they were using it instead of doing the reading. That there was only 1 out of 40 students who had actually handed in a portion of an assignment that was unedited AI, and it was only a few paragraphs, and they didn't care about the assignment. It was an anonymous survey. I have for you a handout, which I'll put in the chat box at the end of the workshop, which mentions my language that Caroline just referred to for my first year summer, where they were allowed to use it. And basically, just since we talked about this assignment, and then I want Nathan to speak, I had them, they could use AI. They had to submit the prompt, that the question or prompt they asked the AI and the output in quotes, and then either a comment. This was for reading assignments. It's not for like writing a paper. And they had to include either a commentary on why that output was correct, or an edited version that they edited for how to make it more correct than what ChatGPT or whatever used. So it was one way I tried it, and I will say that as a practice, it worked. One student fed her notes in to ChatGPT. It sort of mumbled it up, and she got a low B. Another student clearly hadn't done the reading at all, and they failed the assignment because what they submitted from ChatGPT was wrong. So, and that's a great segue into Nathan. Nathan Favaro, I've asked to speak because he wrote a really interesting, a short piece, which I reference in my handout, so don't worry. And, but he's now going to speak. Hi, Nathan. And
hi, everyone.
He's going to speak about an exercise he did with his students using AI I think it was last semester. And I'll put his bio in the chat box.
Great. Thanks, Betsy. I'm really happy to be here and chat a little bit. I just put the link to my write-up in the chat so that you can see that. And I'll try to overlap a little bit, just enough to kind of give you some context, but also give you a little bit of different content than what's in the write-up because you can read that on your own if you're interested. So I've been one of the things that is challenging, of course, as a professor in trying to do an assignment or even broach the topic of ChatGPT with students sometimes is that it's so new. We didn't, get training in it for the most part. Or, maybe we got training in some things that are related and give us a perspective on ChatGPT, but a lot of us, I think, feel like we don't fully understand it. And it's also just changing so fast. And so those were some of the things that I confronted as I was trying to figure out how to build an assignment. And one thing that was really important was that I make the assignment flexible enough that if students started getting really different output from the generative AI, or one particular tool shut down and wouldn't let them block their IP address or something like that, that they could switch to another tool. So you'll see that in some of the assignment description if you go and look at portions of the assignment description that I included. But to give a brief overview of the assignment that I gave my students, and I should note that I was working with graduate students, master's students, and I think that the age cohort differences that Betsy mentioned are probably really important for how students react and their familiarity with generative AI. But the assignment I gave them was to have generative AI write 2 essays on 2 different topics. And the 2 topics that I picked because they fit what I was, my curriculum in public administration and policy is one about environmental justice and thinking about how environmental rules are related to comment periods from the public, equity issues, those kinds of things. And a second on the launch of healthcare.gov and how that didn't go well and what were some of the causes of why the launch of healthcare.gov didn't go well when Obamacare rolled out. So I wanted them to have generative AI create essays on both of those topics. And I provided some readings on both topics and assigned each student to skim the readings for one topic or the other. And I told them, don't do the readings for the topic that you don't, that I don't assign you to look at. So the idea is that they get that experience of interacting with generative AI to produce a reading on a topic that they know something about because they've skimmed the readings, as well as on a topic where they completely skipped the readings and don't know much about it. And then the final step was to bring those 2 essays to class, I guess second to final step, bring those 2 essays to class, bring printouts, go in small groups with people who did the readings on the opposite topic and discuss what they found, look at each other's essays, see how other students got different results than they did, and then finally to write their own reflection essay on all of this. So I was pretty happy with how the assignment went. One thing that Betsy asked me about that I didn't speak to so much in the write-up that I did for the Beat was what kind of reflection students actually brought out. And I guess I should maybe preface this by saying that even before we did the assignment, we had discussions of ChatGPT. And like I said, I was working with master's students, but they were all over the map in terms of their prior familiarity with and usage with ChatGPT. So for example, some students had never used it and were actually a bit apprehensive about using it. And students had all kinds of ethical concerns. Was it going to perpetuate racial bias? Did it have factual inaccuracies? The way that training data was being used to even create these tools. And so, I explicitly acknowledged to students, I think it's important to use this for an assignment to learn something about it, but I'm not necessarily saying that you should violate your ethical concerns about using it regularly or something like that. And I share some of those ethical concerns. Other students were using it daily, right? And very familiar with these tools. So all over the map in terms of students' prior experience and comfort with these tools. So in terms of after the assignment, what were some of the things that they noted in their essay reflections? Some felt that they couldn't even assess the quality of the essay that was produced when they didn't do the readings, which was a little bit surprising to me because I felt like, well, even if I'm not that familiar with the topic, I can say something about, is it a well-structured essay? Is it not? But some students just felt like they really couldn't assess when they didn't do the readings, which I thought was interesting. Lots of concerns being raised about bias when they thought about how these tools might be used in the workforce and things like that. A lot of observations that the essays sounded very plausible and talked about things at a high level pretty well, but they didn't give examples or specific evidence to back their claims. And that even when they asked the chatbots to revise and give specific examples, that they often weren't really able to do that. So they felt like lack of examples was a big problem, that they probably had to go in and add themselves if they wanted those to end up in the essay. People did note that it was very helpful for summarizing, especially the relatively large volumes of text that I gave them. At least one student noticed that the generative AI was maybe more helpful with generating structure for an essay than doing actual analysis. And I thought it was really interesting because on the one hand, some students really highlighted that you have to give very specific instructions, which might be difficult to do if you haven't looked at the readings at all, right? And on the other hand, one student who really spent a lot of time trying to give, the chatbot information about, here's a sample of my writing, so you can kind of mimic my voice as an author, giving lots of preface about what the assignment was about and what kind of audience they had in mind and that kind of thing. And this student, after doing all this work, asking for lots of revisions, he got to class, saw the essays that his peers had created, and some of them had given almost no attention to writing careful prompts. And he said, my essay didn't turn out that much better than those people who just kind of put in a sloppy prompt, right? So I think those are kind of two different perspectives. On the one hand, when you ask for revisions, it can require a lot of hand-holding. It doesn't always do what you ask it to do in the revisions. And on the other hand, often if you just put in kind of a sloppy prompt, you get something pretty plausible, and it might feel like your effort isn't really rewarded if you try to ask for a lot more revisions and details. I think I will mostly leave things there. I think, it was really instructive if I zoom out a little bit, not just in this class, but also in another class where I teach statistics, to see how differently students interacted with the chatbot than I did, in terms of, especially when talking about things like coding, trying to teach them the statistical program R. When I first asked ChatGPT to write our code, I was just kind of blown away by how good it was, even though it makes mistakes sometimes. But I realized that my students don't know how to ask ChatGPT to write R code. They haven't learned enough about how to conceptualize what they want to happen in the statistical analysis to actually be able to precisely ask ChatGPT to even write the code. And I think that was really eye-opening and helped reinforce for me what has been the most useful, I think, analogy, which came up earlier today, for how to think about ChatGPT, which is that it's like a calculator, right? You still have to learn your multiplication tables, right? Even though there's calculators that can do it instantly. Somebody who's had no math training is not going to be able to make good use of a calculator. And I think in the same way, people still need human understanding in order to be able to make good use of ChatGPT. And I felt like I could get ChatGPT to produce much better results on, topics that were substantive as well as technical topics because of the knowledge that I brought to interacting with it, compared to many of my students. So I'll leave things there, but thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Nathan. That's absolutely, and I would add not just the knowledge you had, but it's really the skills of analyzing. As a social scientist, you know how to make sense, because it doesn't surprise me that if you don't have any knowledge or the ability to know whether it is a reasonable argument, whether there's evidence there to support the argument, whether it's there, that whether you don't have that skill or ability to evaluate, then you won't be able to, learn. And I think that's the skills that Josh was talking about early on. And so I would ask Josh and Caroline if they have any comments to Nathan.
I guess speaking as like a student, I would love an activity like that level of engagement. And I think that could also just be useful in like having a lot of those comprehension skills outside of AI, but just understanding like the information that we're processing, because there are different pieces of literature out there that can be misleading. And so there's that. I think it's also really important from students who maybe have not touched AI to know like AI can have its caveats. And I think that that would be really helpful, especially for first year students who are entering the university thinking AI is this like Hail Mary perfect solution when it can just be an assistant at best.
Yeah, I think I agree. I also, the truth is Caroline knows much more about AI than I do. Her experimentation, obviously I've mentioned that I've tried these things and I've done work on them and I've used them in certain ways in non-academic contexts. But there is the truth that, engaging with these tools, especially in a structured academic environment, has real value. So, my, skepticism of AI, and again, it's a measure of degrees. Caroline talked a lot about accessibility. It's a super valuable tool for accessibility. It's a super valuable tool in a lot of different ways. But it needs to be internalized, as far as I can tell. It needs to be worked into the system, whether it's rules or discussion, whatever it may be. Not discussing it, not having it be a topic that's broached, or especially, included, I think is a danger for all the reasons I said, harming learning, but it does have real value when, internalized. Thank you.
So I just want to say that I have about 2 more hours worth of ideas that I'd like to discuss. And I have to say that, so what I just did is I put into the chat box a handout that I wrote. And it is, I know that I had promised you to evaluate assignments as part of the learning outcomes for this workshop. That was before I knew that I had 50 minutes. I thought I had 75 minutes. So we're not going to have time to do that. And instead I just gave us, and also I didn't know how many people would show up. 123 people we've had today is just too many to try and do that in any organized fashion. And so what I've done for you, what I've prepared for you is this handout, which gives you, it has 3 sections to it. And if you can click on, if you go to the chat box and you click on the that document, that file, and it should open up for you and you should be able to save it. If anyone has problems, they can email me. But it has 3 sections. One is assignments that you can use generative AI, like that these what are called LLMs or large language models, such as ChatGPT, Google Bard. And I think these are exercises that enhance learning. It also has some exercises on looking at AI literacy, the things that we talked about in terms of bias, in terms of misinformation. And there's a fabulous exercise that a professor at Pepperdine University did with her students on everyone putting their research question in for a lit review. And then she color coded where it gave wrong information. The AI gave wrong information, and a citation that might have been existed, but wasn't relevant to their student's paper or topic. And then red, it's color coded if it's wrong, like the citation doesn't exist. And you'll see, so I just see now someone is having difficulty not seeing the handout. Could people let me know if you are able to see the handout? Okay, so I just put it in again, and a couple of people can see it. If you're unable to see it, great. If you're unable to see it, I will get it to you. It's the best I can do at this point. Thank you for letting me know. So, and the third part of the handout are incentives, creating a learning environment where students don't want to use AI, if that's what you think. There is no way for us to prohibit students from using it. And there is no, as we've talked about, there's no good way for students, for us, for faculty to be able to evaluate whether something was AI generated or not. I will say this, one thing I heard recently, maybe what this means, and this is what I say here at the end, maybe what it means for those of us who are resistant or more skeptical about using it, or and I'll rephrase that. If you have a research assignment that you think there are reasons why a student shouldn't use AI to do it, or some sort of analytical essay or personal essay, and you don't want them using it, in addition is what Josh talked about, which is to provide the reasoning and the rationale for why this is a useful assignment. I think what it means maybe is to rethink our assignments and focus much more on the process and less on the output. And so it's really about engaging our students to think about sort of, and to engage them in that process of learning and not focused so much on demonstrating or the outcome, in some way. And I agree with Josh. I really caution against, as I say in my handout, going to these lockdown browser exams or oral essays, because it might work for some, but we have differentiated, we have neurodivergent students that's really not going to be useful for. So I am so out of time. The C2L people would like you to do a survey. Let us know what you thought. And thanks for coming. And I really want to thank our panelists, Josh, Caroline, and Nathan. You were terrific, and you saved me from myself. So thank you so much, everyone. I wish you all a healthy and productive semester, and be well. And for those who are still here, I'm happy to open it up to any questions or comments anyone has. I don't have to go anywhere. I haven't been out of my study in 8 days.
I'm also happy to answer questions if people have them.
So this is where we get to see. So Nathan, nice to meet you. See you face to face.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. I've got a meeting in 15 minutes with a student I got to get ready for, so I should probably hop off. But thanks for the opportunity to present. And sorry I didn't log on a little bit earlier.
No, you're good. We got to talk about your room rater though.
Yeah, this is my office.
I know we got to do. I got some artwork I can give you. I got plenty.
I've got some that I have not managed to put on the wall yet, but it's not my priority. See you later.
Thanks. Take care.
Thank you, and I hope you get better soon.
Thank you, Olga.
Yes.
Betsy, can I ask you a question? When you use the tools that I was looking at your handout, which I got to go through with a fine-tooth comb, do you grade that assignment or do you use it for completion, non-completion? I'm just asking
The
because
assignments are graded.
they're graded. So everything, even if you're integrating chat, GBT.
So this is really still a question for me, which is, and I've talked about this with the students, which is how do, as faculty member, let's say I have a student like Josh who just sat there with the struggle and worked on that paper. And then another student who used the we'll just say ChatGPT, and they used it for a first draft. They then did a little bit of research and reading on it, but it was a lot less effort in that sense. But because they've learned how to use this tool. How do I then evaluate those two work products? And that's where I had said to my students, I need to evaluate your learning. And that's why I have my whole language there for the policy, because I actually was able to look and see what the students had learned. And it takes a little bit more time, I think. But I think ultimately I don't have a full answer for you, Michelle. But I think that we're going to have to focus more on the process of learning and demonstrate how the student demonstrates that process of learning Yeah, it's complicated. I had another student in that freshman seminar. They weren't supposed to use ChatGPT for essays. This student was really struggling, didn't really take that in. His third paper, he used ChatGPT, and I said, okay, I need to see. What he did was he wrote a draft. He's put it into ChatGPT. That was draft 2. And then draft 3 was he submitted was based on the Writing Center. And so I could see he did a lot of work. I'll say that. Now, so if another person might say, he presented to me that he had done a lot of work. I mean, to me, I think it looked like he had done a lot of work. He presented all 3 versions of it. I could see progress. And who am I to say that that's less work than what Josh might have gone through without using it? And on this webinar I was on yesterday, which was brilliant, the AAC and you a brilliant webinar on AI. And there was a faculty member who said that he had assignments that he thought were AI proof, and he gave them to his students. And the students just started laughing. And they were like, oh yeah, I mean, I do this, I got that, and they basically took it apart in minutes. And even to the point where they said, yeah, I'd have it right. I'd ask for a lousy draft, and then I'd ask them to take that draft and make a better draft. So if we get into this rut of, are they cheating? Are they cheating? We lose. I'm just going to keep the focus on the learning and presenting to the students that I want them to learn. And if they come along for the ride, but I also have to be very explicit. I will disclose in the class that Josh took, I said, please, I don't want you to use AI because it's not going to help you. And if you want, I said, don't go look at don't go see the bot, come see me. And I spent a lot of time providing resources. Someone told me that one of my students had used ChatGPT on one of the exams. And I'm not surprised. And that's on me because it's a lousy exam. It's an exam. It's a lousy exam. It's an exam that lends itself to getting an answer from ChatGPT. So we really need to think about what our assignments are.
Josh is my instructor next semester at the SI, so he and I will be having a conversation.
But like I said, I'm not gonna spend my time on that. I think we lose. I come to work every day so that I can get excited about learning and get my students excited about learning. If I get into a thing about, I think we need to be thoughtful and really, it probably means rethinking a lot of our assignments. Josh, you want to comment? And we're still being recorded.
Yeah, I mean, I'd mentioned this, but I feel the same way. I think very honestly, I think I mentioned the term arms race, like it is. The tools for accountability are going to evolve. And maybe one day we're going to have an incredible tool that will not only be able to look backward and say, oh, this was AI, but be able to match existing AI systems. But I feel like the ingenuity of not only the tools themselves, but of students. I mean, you mentioned the AI proof tests or assignments. I don't think it's possible. Even me, someone who's not as versed in AI as Caroline, would be able to likely, take an assignment apart and break it down. And it is tough. I think, having to think about redoing assignments is not only, I'm sure, an enormous amount of work, but also difficult. But I think it also comes down to like professors engaging with AI, and trying to develop the expertise that someone like Caroline, like she has a deep knowledge of AI. And I mean, I've started 2 new jobs. One of them's on the Hill. We do use AI. it's necessary, and a lot of people say it's a core skill, and I think that's a valuable point. Employers are definitely looking for it, but the same way I've talked about other core skills, I mean, I can take a class on how to use AI. I can take a class on how to use Microsoft Office. I can't the same way take a class on how to be creative or how to, deploy certain types of analysis. I mean, of course it exists, but I think, it's not quite comparable. So for professors, I think part of it, like a real part of it, is engaging with the systems. So you yourself understand them and then moving forward with that on your own work. And, consulting with students, it seems like a good idea to me, just in general, because we have a different perspective that I assume will also be valuable.
So anyone else is still on this call, if you have a question or comment? I think we're going to wrap up, and I'm going to go take a nap. Thank you all for attending, participating, and please stay healthy. All right, take care.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cohn.
Thank
Have a great day.
you.
So I'll go ahead and end the Zoom meeting then, Betsy.
Please.
All right. Thanks again.
Oh, will I be able to save the chat? I think I have, yes. Okay.
Okay, great.